Thanks for watching CBS News Sacramento. Right now, candidates running for governor are getting ready to speak at the California Educational Gubernatorial Forum presented by the Asian Pacific American Public Affairs Association and Sacramento State University. Our very own CBS News California Investigates correspondent Julie Watts is co-hosting this event. We'll take you live inside the Sacramento State Ballroom.
Once again, thank you to all of our esteemed audience members here in Sacramento. And of course, to those watching live on our CBS News California streaming platforms across the state. We want to take a moment now before we start to give you an idea of the rules. We're going to review the format of this forum. It's a little different than other things you've seen. So each candidate will have the opportunity to take the stage individually. The order was determined by a random draw, so we're not playing favorites here. The candidates did receive, and we don't do this in journalism, but they did receive in advance a list of possible questions from our community leaders who are here in the audience today. But they don't know which question we're going to ask, so they were able to prepare for all of those questions. The questions will appear behind me on the screen back there. They're also going to appear up front in front of the candidates so they can actually read along with us as we're reading those questions. And each candidate will have a total of 8 minutes, first to answer the question and then to continue on and add any additional remarks, talk about why they believe they are the best candidate for California governor. To keep the program on track, we do have a timekeeper up here. He's going to help keep these folks honest, stick to time, and if that doesn't work, the microphone will in fact shut off and we will start playing music at 8 minutes. We are serious about this. For those of you who are at the Emmy Awards, we're actually going to do it this time. We're going to turn the mics off. All right, so now it's your turn. I have some guidance for you. We do need to ask that our in-person audience here please refrain from making any comments during the program. Of course, you can clap after they're done, but no editorial comments, please. All 8 candidates who are here today, they've agreed to this format. For today, they have also agreed not to talk about any other candidate in any way. So this, again, is a little different than some of the other things you've seen. I do want to point out, if you check out your programs there on the table, and folks at home, you can head to the APAPA website. There are 3 additional candidates who could not be here today. So you're going to find their bios in these programs. You have them on your table. And again, folks at home, you can go to the APAPA website. They have also provided pre-recorded videos, so you get a flavor of who they are and what they are about. And, you know, it's special. It's such an honor to be here to do this, but one of the coolest things I've ever done in my entire life has been afforded to me by APAPA. I got to sit down with all 11 candidates for an in-depth interview with every person who wants to be your next governor. And I don't know if any of you folks have seen some of our CBS News California investigations, but I'm not the easiest reporter to sit down and do an interview with. I ask the tough questions, and they, to their credit, for the most part, allowed me to really ask those tough questions. So we've already started rolling out some of those segments. We have one segment with one candidate each night on our CBS News California stations in San Francisco, Sacramento, and Los Angeles. But we're going to be rolling out a series of topic-specific segments over the coming weeks, both online and in some cases on air, where we're going to allow you to take a deeper dive into the specific issues that matter most to you. So if it's gas prices, if it's housing affordability, if it's immigration or redistricting, we asked each candidate the same question, and you'll get to see them side by side, their answers to those same issues. But even better, unlike what we're going to see today, I got to ask follow-up questions. And so you get to see what happens when we push through the talking points and we really get down and ask those tough questions. So those will be coming out here over the next couple of weeks. But today, this is a really great opportunity to introduce you to these candidates, where they get to stand up here uninterrupted and tell you who they are. They get to talk about their own experiences, their views, their qualifications, what they think makes them the best candidate for California governor. And we are going to start off with our first candidate here. I'm going to hand the mic over to my co-MC, and we're going to introduce you to Mr. Tony Thurmond. Please welcome.
You have 8 minutes total for your remarks. Please begin by responding to this question presented by Dr. Victor Thompson from the National Pacific Islander Education Network. According to an analysis by the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, we have one of the toughest job markets for recent graduates since 2015. As governor, how do you plan to address unemployment rates and increase accessible job opportunities for California graduates. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you for being here. Thank you for that important question. There's nothing more important that we can do to make sure that our 40 million Californians have the ability to secure and retain good-paying jobs in our state. This is a great state, but many are challenged to stay here. They can't afford the high costs for gas, for food, for housing. And in addition to the ideas that I will share with you about how to provide jobs for Californians, I want you to know that as governor, I will be providing a tax credit to middle-class and working-class Californians to help them cover those costs. We have many sectors that can accommodate Californians. For example, if you think about the biotech sector, there are more than 500,000 jobs that are available to be filled in our state alone, not counting those companies that are outside of California that want to do business with California. And so as someone who's worked in the biotech sector and helped others to get jobs in biotech, I know that there is a continuum of jobs that we can create for someone who has a PhD or someone who has a diploma or someone who has a certificate. And they can continue to earn and learn. And so we will create more programs to help Californians to enter biotech. We would create more opportunities for Californians to enter into STEAM jobs, science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. We have jobs in computer science, in cybersecurity, in AI that will create opportunities for Californians. As we speak, I've just launched an AI work group to focus on how we can use artificial intelligence in education, not to replace educators, but to supplement the work that educators do. There are boundless jobs for those who would work in education and those who work in AI to support those in our state. We have to also acknowledge that there are many paths to working in the state of California. They don't all require a degree. And while in some cases we will focus on increasing degree attainment for Californians, we have to recognize that there are many who've been able to earn just as much and sometimes more money than those who don't have a degree. And that's by working through apprenticeship training programs and working in construction and having the chance to build California's infrastructure. And we have to build in the great state of California. Many of you know last year that I helped secure $10 billion to help us build and modernize California schools in our state. I'm working as we speak to get another $10 billion to build affordable housing for many people in our state. And the people who work on these programs have to be able to earn a decent wage so they can afford to live in the housing that they have built. I've also recently worked with our state controller to pass a graduation requirement so our students learn personal finance. When students learn personal finance, they're less likely to have debt, and they're more likely to go to college, and they're able to understand the way business works. But the best thing that we can do in government to create jobs is to create the conditions for the employers. Government cannot create jobs, but we can create the conditions that help our employers, and that means providing the ability for them to thrive. That's why I supported this year's film tax credit to support one of our major industries that is at risk of being taken away from our state. And we have to support tax credits for any employer, and I will, for any industry and employer who creates job opportunities for Californians. It is so important to me, and this is what I'm committed to doing as governor so that we can continue to see Californians thrive. Yeah, I love the state. It's a great state, but we're facing many challenges. I made the decision to run for governor after serving 18 years as an elected official here and spending 20-plus years running nonprofits in our state because I believe that we can do better. We have to address the issues of homelessness. We have to address issues around the lack of housing. The ability to own a home is the American dream, and it's slipping away as we speak. And as we speak, I am working on a plan to build 2.5 million units of housing in every county across our state. And we are building with school districts that have surplus property and 75,000 acres of land ready for development to give them the resources to develop and pre-develop those issues. I'm so grateful to the APAPA Network for putting this on today. Thank you, Cece and Mary and Regina and all of you who've helped to make today this special day. You know, it's important that we have a governor who will fight for our diverse communities in our state and who will stand up to even the federal government, even the president, whoever it takes, to say that we don't need deportation threats in our state. We need someone who values the experience of immigrants. That's why I've supported 3 different pieces of legislation that says that ICE has no place on our school campuses or on great colleges like Sac State. Go Hornets, Stingers up. We need to make sure that we continue to protect our immigrant families and work with the members of Congress to create a pathway to citizenship so that people can become citizens. I know this because before you is the son and grandson of immigrants. My grandparents came here and they cleaned bathrooms for a living to make a better way of life for their family. My grandmother was born in San Andres, Colombia. My grandfather was born in Jamaica. They met in Panama where they raised their family and where my mother was born, and they emigrated here. And my mother came here as a teacher and instilled the values in me that we work hard. Immigrants are making great things happen. We need to continue to protect our immigrant communities. We need to continue to stand against hate. Many of us in the APAPA community worked together when there was hate against the AAPI community. And we passed legislation, we built training programs to say that there's no place for hate in our state. We must continue to build housing. We must continue to nurture our immigrant communities. We must continue to make sure that there's access to education, that we replace the slots in healthcare that were lost by those who will be cut off of the rolls of Medicaid, and that we make it possible for everyone to have access to healthcare. This is a critical moment, and I'm cashing in on all the experiences that I've had as a city council member, as a school board member, as a state legislator, twice as your state superintendent, serving 6 million students in the state that is the only state where we guarantee preschool for every single 4-year-old in our state, where we give universal meals to every hungry student. You're looking at the original free lunch student in the state of California. I grew up in a household where we didn't have food. I lost both my parents by the time I was 6 years old. My mom to cancer, my dad who was a Vietnam vet who never came home from the war. I was raised by a cousin who's an immigrant as a nurse's aide who took me in and raised me and my 5-year-old brother in a household where we didn't have food. So we depended on programs like the free lunch program and food stamps and government cheese. And that's why I'm so proud to have made it possible for us to have universal meals for every single hungry student in our state. We have to build and expand on mental health programs. We have to address the water issues in our state, and we have to build housing. We have to make sure that we secure and retain good jobs for our Californians. We have to provide funding to our CSUs and our UCs. And as a trustee at the CSU and as a UC regent, I've been working hard to get new revenue to support our CSUs, to support our UCs, and our community college system. This is our future. Like the great interns who we have the honor to be with here today, they are our future. We've been through tough times, but a better time is ahead. I'm Tony Thurmond, and I'd like to be the next governor of the state of California.
Thank you, Mr. Thurmond. Great to see you again. See, I told you it worked this time. I can't tell you how many events I've hosted where we pretend like we're going to turn the mics off and we don't. They don't play around here. All right, so now it is time for our next candidate. But before I introduce him, I did just want to, for our folks at home, obviously everyone in the room, I think, probably has a good idea of who these folks are, of what their resumes are. But I did just want to share with our viewers at home, in case you weren't aware, Tony Thurmond was essentially the head of our California Department of Education. He also was assembly member, and so obviously education is at the forefront of who he is. He is running as a Democrat to replace Governor Gavin Newsom when he terms out next year. Now, our next candidate is running as a Republican to replace our governor. Please join me in welcoming Leo Zacky. You may know his last name, Zacky Farms. It was sort of a household name in California for many years. Come on up, Mr. Zacky. Pleasure to see you again. So again, I want to remind you, you have 8 minutes total to both answer the question and tell us a bit about who you are and why you're running for governor. We're going to begin with a question from the president of the Asian Peace Officers Association, Brent Kanayuki. Now, this is actually one of the topics that we did cover in our interview. So all of the candidates answered this issue. I kind of know where you're going to go with this, but I can't wait for folks here to listen. Voters approved a 2008 proposition to build the country's first high-speed rail in California. In July, President Trump announced that he is rescinding $4 billion in federal funding for that high-speed rail project. So far, the state of California has spent $14 billion on this project. Do you support this development, or do you believe that we should focus taxpayer money on other matters? You have 8 minutes, sir.
No, I do not think that we should continue to fund this bullet train to nowhere. It was sold to us as a train that was going to go from LA to San Francisco. Well, it looks like it's only going from Bakersfield to Modesto, and it's not really doing that either. It's been a huge waste of our dollars. Things that could have been spent on actually preparing the state with infrastructure. So day one, if it's not already done, it's gone. It's a total waste. And I've been asked, what would we do with what's already built? Just leave it. It's a monument and a testament to fraud and failure here in California, and the biggest money laundering scheme we've ever witnessed. I would love to have cool things like that, but if we're gonna do things like that, we're gonna need private enterprise to do it. They're building a high-speed rail in Texas right now. They're using private enterprise to do that. Look at Brightline in other states like Florida. There are ways that we can have really efficient public transit, but I think it's best left to the private sector and let them compete and bid for it and use their money. We'll get the results, but I think it's a better approach. Dams, not trains. That's the signs you see when you drive up the 99 in the Central Valley. We're wasting money that could be used for water storage for our farmers. Farmers are being cut off from water. In Northern California, 7,000 are now going without water. There are orchards with pear trees that are 110 years old. And they're gonna die. You can't really replace that. And agriculture is the #1 revenue generator for the state of California. We're the world leader in strawberries, avocados, almonds, and artichokes. We lead the nation in dairy cattle, beef cattle, wine, table grapes. We got more peaches than Georgia, more oranges than Florida. But those industries will leave as that water continues to dry up. We need to build water storage. In the last 50 years, the population of the state has doubled, but we haven't built any significant water storage. We've been approved for desalination plants, but regulatory processes like the Coastal Commission and CEQA prevent them from being operational. We also don't have the ability to power that because we're shutting down nuclear power plants. And I'm all for clean energy, but we can do it with small modular nuclear reactors. Most of our naval fleet runs on nuclear reactors. I don't see any Navy guys going on leave with appendages growing out of their foreheads. We have the technology. We have the resource right there off the coast. But we also have to be able to build out that infrastructure. We have to build reservoirs to capture the rainwater, build dams and reservoirs at the high altitude to capture the snowpack. You could have gone to Mammoth this year and snowboarded into July. And last year, you could have done it into August. It's not like we're not getting the water. We're just not collecting it. You have the Merced bypass that just funnels that snow melt right to the sea. And I want to make sure that we have water for our rivers, but we have to do our job and harness it and collect it. And then, once we create abundance, which we have the power to do, I'm always sick of hearing, we're running out of this, we're running out of that, we don't have enough. We can make more. We can do it. So we build out an abundance of water here in the state of California, and we can then turn it into a net revenue generator. We'll have plenty of water for our farmers, affordable water, that is. I mean, right now in the Central Valley, they're limited to 1.65 cubic feet per acre. And for those of you who need to understand what that means, things like citrus take 2.25 cubic feet per acre. Almonds, 4.5. So the only thing that the farmers can do is cut back on the crops they grow. And this isn't a light switch. You have to actually have them become mature. It takes years. For almonds, it's like 5 years to become mature, 5 to 7 years. So when we have the water, our farmers can grow cheap, affordable crops. We can have the produce and be able to produce it here in California. And the more that we can grow, the cheaper those products become. So the cost of living comes down. But it also makes us far more competitive on the global stage. As I mentioned, all the things that we lead the world in. Being able to export that will create far more tax revenue for the state. More jobs. What a concept. And getting there, we'll have to employ these awesome building projects as well. It's been done before. I mean, the Hoover Dam was a public works project, and we're still using that today. Imagine if we had more of those. The hydroelectric power, the water storage. It can all be done. We have so much land to do it with. But as I mentioned, turning it into a net revenue positive generator. We share the lion's share. We get the lion's share of the Colorado Rivershed. We share it with Mexico, with Arizona, with Nevada. Utah, Colorado, because the Colorado River runs all through there. So we can auction off that water source as we have our abundance, so we can bring in revenue that way into the state, so we can offset the expenditures that we have. Right now, the state solely relies on tax income. We have the resources. We can do this. And it's not just the water. Think about all the ways we can fight fires too, far easier. When you have all these dotted around the state, all these reservoirs, it's so much easier for those helicopters to come and recharge and go put out those flames. We can mitigate the devastation here in California. There's a reason water is the key foundational building block on life here on the planet. We have to have more of it. We have the tools to do it. And I'm a farmer. This is what I grew up around. And it's not just for crops. Like I mentioned, I was in poultry. Well, you have to obviously have the birds drink. And when you process it, you need water to clean out the birds, to make it safe to eat. You also have to do sanitation if you want to keep things like E. coli and Listeria, Campylobacter, out and away from any harm doing to people. This state needs the water. It doesn't need a wasteful train. Our infrastructure is in shambles. The fact that we pave roads in small increments and then tear them up just to lay new lines, it's ridiculous. So, as I mentioned, that revenue stream will be key to California. But there's other resources too. We have oil, we have timber, but we also have human capital. We have the brightest people in the world here in California, real creators, real ingenuitive people. We have to deregulate in the state. We have to streamline the permitting process and allow people to become their own wealth generators. Creating jobs, having water, utilizing oil for cheap, affordable fuel here in the state, because that also impacts agriculture too. Everything that you've ever had somehow has had oil attached to it, whether it's the clothes that you're wearing or the products on the shelves in the grocery store. It's all oil. It's all plastics. We can refine it here in California. We can extract it here in California. This is up to you. So just because I'm a Republican doesn't mean I'm the enemy. We all know that these key foundational issues are impacting us all here in California. It's about what's right, about what's not working, what's wrong. This isn't about party anymore. It's about having a plan forward that people can understand with real feasible results. I'm here to bring that to everybody in California. I want to work with everybody in the legislature, and I want to make sure that the people in California get exactly what they deserve. And that's the life that they've been missing out on. We can do this. We have to be Team California. We have to have the ability to grow. And that's what I'd like to do. So please look into me, learn about me. I don't need this job. California needs me to have this job. It's a plan forward for everybody. And I'm looking forward to uniting this state under the Zacky banner. So thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today.
At this time, I will introduce our third candidate, Dr. Butch Ware, to the podium for his remark. As shared earlier, you have 8 minutes total for your remarks. First, please include a response to this question presented by Mr. Tikoy Porter, President of the National Action Network Sacramento chapter. Over the past decade, California has seen extreme heat waves and natural disasters. As governor, how do you plan to further prepare the state of California for natural disasters? How do you plan to work with the federal government to ensure California gets the funding needed to recover and rebuild? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. As the only non-corporate funded candidate here representing the Green Party and not representing Team Blue or Team Red, this question is right up my alley. Because the Green Party was founded on environmental conservation principles 4 decades ago at Macalester College and has run on environmental sanity and sustainability ever since. Unfortunately, here in the state of California, especially under alternating blue and red governors, we have not had policies of environmental sustainability. Principle number 1 of the environmental justice movement worldwide is polluters pay. The corporations that poison our water, the corporations that poison our air are supposed to pay the costs so that when PG&E, for example, is responsible for 400 plus wildfires and the bill for the damages of those fires registers in the billions of dollars. They're not supposed to have that written off by Gavin Newsom and his administration, and those costs go back onto the taxpayers. So the first thing that we need to do is to hold corporations accountable. And unfortunately, neither Team Blue nor Team Red is willing to do that for a very simple reason. Who funds you, runs you. These two parties, Team Blue and Team Red, have brought this country and this state to its knees. And they have done so because they are in the pockets of wealthy billionaires and corporations and are incapable of representing ordinary working people. Well, the Green Party only accepts contributions from ordinary people, no corporate donations. And we are not invested in a fake culture war between a so-called left and a so-called right that keeps people divided on bogus culture war issues, while our civil rights and civil liberties are lifted away from us and money is lifted out of our pockets. Our tax is going to incinerate children in tents in Palestine. Our tax is going to subsidize wealthy corporations so that Tesla pays 0.75% effective tax rate, while we, as ordinary working people, subsidize the wealthiest in our society. They want you to think that this is about left versus right, but it ain't about left versus right. It's about top versus bottom. And we need a candidate that is here to represent the working class and not the ruling class. But I'm going to tell you something. We see through the nonsense. Because the biggest lie they tell is that this is a country that's divided between blue states and red states, blue counties and red counties. 38%, according to Pew Research 2019, 38% of American voters identify themselves as independents. More than the 31% that identify as Democrats or the 26% that identify as Republicans. And Californians are above all free thinkers. Do not fall for the blue Kool-Aid versus the red Kool-Aid. Because they both work for the same corporations. They both work for APAC, and they both work for weapons manufacturers. And you guys know that you need an independent voice in politics. Because a Gallup poll in 2023 said that 63% of American voters say that these two parties do such a, quote, poor job, that's the wording of the poll, that we need an independent third party that isn't funded by corporations. That's a supermajority of American voters. And when you poll independents, it's 70% of independents that say we need such a party. Well, here we are. And they had to let me on this stage, even though they don't want to, because I was the vice presidential candidate in 2024, and they didn't have nobody else up here. They got 1 million votes for the White House. So they couldn't freeze the Green Party out of this one. We need an outsider in our politics, and we need people that aren't beholden to corporations, that will be able to represent ordinary working people. I'm such a person, not because my parents were immigrants or any such thing like that. My father was a locksmith with a 6th grade education. And my mother was a single mother, 15 years old, pregnant with me. Her high school guidance counselor told her she should have an abortion because she was pregnant by a black man in 1973. I never lived at the same street address for a calendar year until I turned 9 years old. I struggled against incredible poverty, so when I talk about addressing the homelessness crisis in the state of California, it's because I lived unhoused. It's because my father was on and off the streets, and I want a solution that includes single-payer health care that is comprehensive of mental health care, addiction treatment, so that we can get to the root of some of the problems that people are facing. But I also want rent control. I also want Blackstone and BlackRock to be taxed so heavy on all the vacant properties that they hold that run the price of your rental housing and your home ownership prices up. We need to tax them so that we can get social housing that's affordable for people. And by taking out the root causes of the homelessness crisis in the state of California, then we can actually solve the problem. But Team Blue hasn't been able to do it because they've taken $25 billion of your dollars over the last 5 years and put it into homelessness alleviation programs. And the number of people sleeping on the streets has gone from 120,000 a night to 187,000 a night in 5 years because it has gone into the poverty industrial complex, NGOs, and developers. Everybody else is going to tell you build, build, build. No, we have 14 open units for every homeless person in the city of San Francisco. We need better resource distribution. And I'm here for that. With the last few minutes of my time, I'm just going to tell you a little bit more about myself. I told you about growing up in abject poverty, but I haven't told you why I've taken on this mission. And it's because when I was 15 years old, I read the autobiography of Malcolm X. I read that book cover to cover in one night, and it changed my life. I wanted what Malcolm had. I went out and read an English translation of the Quran the next day. I converted to Islam by the end of the week, and that was my introduction into my personal faith tradition and to the Black resistance tradition, the liberation tradition. And it is from that tradition that I will speak to you with the last words that I have. Malcolm said, "We are not outnumbered, we are out-organized. Working people need a party that will organize for them." And Malcolm also said, "Never let your enemy tell you how many of you there are." After I'm done with this talk, Team Blue and Team Red are going to tell you that a Green Party can't win. But I never let my enemy tell me how many of us there are. I never let the man that I'm against form my opinions for me. Malcolm also told us that the liberal is a fox. It bares its teeth, you think it's smiling at you, but you are on the menu. And that is Team Blue. They hunt by guile, by cunning. The conservative is a wolf. When it bares its teeth, it's into a vicious snarl that leaves the black man with no illusion as to where he stands. We are caught between two predators, a liberal party and a conservative party, and we need a party that serves the people. The last thing that I'm going to say, again from that Black liberation tradition and from Malcolm, is that we have had majorities of Democrats in this state for the last 50 years. Malcolm said, "You put the Democrats first and they put you last, and that makes you a political chump." Well, ain't y'all tired of being chumped? And don't you want to change California so you can change this country, so you can change the world?
Thank you, Mr. Ware. So for those folks at home who may not know, Butch Ware is the Green Party candidate. He also was on the he was the vice presidential candidate for the Green Party on this last ticket. He is a professor in Santa Barbara. And, it's been really cool to be able to sit down with all of these candidates because as you can see already, just this first sneak peek, they're so different, but each person that I sat down with had really interesting perspectives on all the same issues. And I have to tell you, I would say every single person I interviewed, I learned something and I actually thought, that's a great idea. I hope if you aren't governor that you tell the person who's governor because I think it's really interesting. So this is exciting for you to be able to see how vastly different they are and just what uniqueness they bring to this campaign trail. So Mr. Butch Ware, let's give him a round of applause before we invite up our next guest. Our next guest is Mr. Steve Hilton, who is running as a Republican to replace Governor Gavin Newsom. He actually was senior advisor to a former UK Prime Minister during Brexit. We had a really interesting conversation about the things that he learned there and what he can bring to California. And I will tell you, sometimes when you have somebody come in from out of state and they're running for office, I like to poke holes and say, yeah, but that's not how the California legislature works. Or, that's a great idea, but how are you actually going to get it through or how are you going to fund that? And this man did have an answer to all of those questions. I was pleasantly surprised. Let's invite up Mr. Hilton. All right, sir. So now for your question. Okay. A reminder, you only have 8 minutes total. And we ask you to first respond to this question. You see it down there from Sean Piazza. He is a McDonald's franchisee from Orange County representing KFOB, the California Alliance of Family-Owned Businesses. He's also a client of Gladfelty Government Relations. And here is the question for you, sir. The current fiscal year ended in a deficit of $12 billion. Because of this, many services have been eliminated or reduced. As governor, what steps will you take to ensure that we do not fall further into another deficit in the upcoming fiscal years? 8 minutes, sir.
All right. Thank you very much. How are you doing, everybody? It's great to be here. It's a very, very important meeting. I really want to say thank you to every single one of you for what you do, for what this organization does, getting people involved in our community at every level. That is how we make this amazing state the best it can possibly be. And I've got to tell you, I love this question coming from a restaurant owner, because in my past life, that is what I was. And I very much appreciate everything that restaurant owners do in our state, because that is a tough business, I can tell you. I want to say thank you also to the other candidates, to Butch and everyone else running for this office and for every office. Look, we may have disagreements about how we get there and how we make things better in California, but we all have the same aim. We want this state to be the best it possibly can be. Butch spoke about Team Red and Team Blue. As far as I'm concerned, in the end, we're all on the same team. Team Golden. We want to make our beautiful state golden again. That's the theme of my campaign. That's what I'm working for. And I do want to say a quick thanks to Julie as well. If I can just share a little with you about the conversation that we had. Where is Julie? Maybe she's not there. She's not listening. I can just tell you this. So we taped our interviews on a Friday afternoon. And we got talking, and she had fantastic questions about so many different policy areas. And I could see her producer, who's worried about getting back to Sacramento from the Bay Area where I live, on Friday afternoon traffic, saying, come on, wrap it up. But she had so many great questions, and we had so much to talk about. We just went on, and I hope you can check out everything that Julie produced from that conversation, because a lot of the detail that I won't have time to get into right now is there in the conversations that we put on tape. I'm just very quickly going to do two things. Tell you who I am and tell you what I'm fighting for. I'm Steve Hilton. As you can tell from my accent, I wasn't born here. I was born in England, but my parents were Hungarian. They moved from Hungary. They fled communism, a communist regime in Hungary. So I was born in a free country, but a country that was in rapid decline when I first really became aware of politics and policy. It was on the back end of a disastrous period of decline for the UK under socialist policies. Britain was defined as the sick man of Europe. Margaret Thatcher came in, turned things around, and really that ignited in me the appreciation for what real political leadership can do to make a difference, to lift people up in actually a very short space of time. So we were working class immigrant family. My stepfather, also Hungarian, he worked construction. When I was a kid, I'd spend my holidays, vacations, helping out on the construction site. My first job, actually, was project manager for a construction company. More than half my life I've spent in business, half of my career. I've worked all over the world. In Hong Kong, I spent a year in Hong Kong, which was a great experience just before the handover to the communists in 1997. I remember being there on the night of the handover. We had a big party that night, up early. The next morning, I watched as the tanks of the Red Army rolled into Hong Kong. And I said, this isn't going to end well. This isn't going to end well. And sure enough, we see what's happening to the freedoms that were so cherished by the people of Hong Kong. I started my own companies back in England, as I mentioned, restaurants, a very tough business. I worked my way up. I went to Oxford University. My grandmother in Hungary, one of the proudest days of her life. Whatever else I did, she would always brag about how her grandson made it to Oxford University. I ended up working in 10 Downing Street, senior advisor to the Prime Minister, as you heard, responsible for helping with the implementation of our domestic policy reform program. In 2012, we moved here, my wife and my two sons, here to California, to America, the home of freedom, as it should be, and I think many of us agree could be a lot better than it is right now. I taught at Stanford University, started businesses here, had an improbable and unexpected career in the media, hosting a television show called The Next Revolution. 3 years ago, I started an organization called Golden Together. I was frustrated at just talking about things on the TV. I wanted to get back to what I've done most of my career, doing things, solving problems, trying to make a difference. So I started Golden Together to look at the policy challenges facing California and to develop practical, positive solutions based on common sense, not ideology. Not Team Red, not Team Blue, Team Golden. Golden Together, the name of that organization. And here we are today, running for governor. I'll tell you very simply what I'm fighting for, is to make this state the best place in the world to start and raise a family, to start and run and grow a business. Because if we all believe, as I do, as someone who became an American in 2021, the proudest day of my life, that America is the best nation in the world, then California should be the absolute encapsulation of everything that is great and magnificent about our country. Freedom and opportunity and energy and optimism and dynamism and startup hustle. But we all know that things are going off track in California. We know that we're the 4th biggest economy in the world, and I'm proud of that. But we're also the state in America today with the highest unemployment rate, the highest rate of poverty. 35% of Californians, according to a recent survey by United Way, cannot afford to meet their basic needs. The highest housing cost, the highest cost for gas, electricity, the highest taxes. 10 years in a row now, Chief Executive Magazine does a survey of CEOs, the best and worst places to run a business. California, bottom of the list for the last 10 years. We can't go on like this. Everyone knows it's time for change in California. We got to get things back on track. That's what I'm fighting for. The question was about the deficit. Do you know what's happened to California's budget in the last 10 years? Doubled. They've doubled the budget. Is everything twice as good? Most people would say it's worse. Spending more money is very obviously not the answer to the problems that we have facing us in California. The answer is to cut back the bloated bureaucracy that makes it so hard to do anything in California, to run a business, to build housing. This is all the direct result of regulations, bureaucracy, making everything expensive, time-consuming, the litigation. All of these things are the product of the policies that have been implemented over the last 15 years of one-party rule. That's why I say it's time for change in California. It is time for some balance in California. It's not healthy to have one-party rule. I think we can all agree with that. So that's what I'm fighting for, to make California what it can and should be. California means to America what America means to the world. That's what I'm fighting for, to save California, to make the California dream a good job where you make enough to raise your family in a home of your own, in a safe neighborhood, with a good school so your kids have a better life than you.
Really a stickler with that mic back there. I love that. Okay, so, as Mr. Hilton alluded to, we had these really in-depth interviews, and what I thought was so unique about this group, we see politicians get up and they stand up here and they give their talking points. They often don't, you might not be surprised by this, don't really want to answer follow-up questions. They don't always like it when we push, yes, but how are you actually going to do that? And when they do answer those questions, the interviews go much longer. And so I do appreciate someone who's willing to answer the tough questions, and somebody else who was willing to answer the tough questions is our next candidate who we're going to bring up here, and that is Betty Yee. For folks at home, she is a Democrat. She served 2 terms as state controller, 2 terms on the Board of Equalization. I've never interviewed somebody who knows more about our California budget and money than this woman. I have to tell you, it was like a master class. And also, I asked her a lot of tough questions, and I was really appreciative of the fact that she answered them candidly. So I'm looking forward to you all hearing from Miss Betty Yee, if you wouldn't mind coming up on stage. Okay, so we have your question down here on the screen, and folks, you can see it here. Reminder, Ms. Yee, you have 8 minutes, and they are serious. They will turn off that mic and start playing the music. So just warning you one more time. We're going to begin with this question. So please do begin your answer with a question to Dr. Rita Gallardo-Good. She is the chair of the California Commission on the Status of Women and Girls. And her question is, efforts are being made across the state to advance priorities for underserved ethnic communities. As governor, how will you work with our state's diversity caucus to push legislation that is important to them while possibly facing pushback from the federal administration? You have 8 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Julie. Good afternoon, everyone. It's really a pleasure to be in front of you, and I particularly want to just say something about this question. First of all, it really honors, I think, so many of us in this room being from our diverse communities, and how lucky are we to wake up every morning being here in California, where diversity is our greatest strength. What I want to say about this question is really let the data really prove itself. When we look at how we have invested or frankly disinvested in many of our underserved communities, when we have not really had access points for many of our communities to be able to avail themselves of programs and services. I think about what constitutes good governance, and really a part of good governance is about following the rule of law. But the rule of law also says to us we have a special focus on disadvantaged communities. And so when I look at this question, I think about all the great things that California has done. We actually have tried to invest in our communities, and yet we still see many who are continuing to be underserved. And so now, particularly with the pushback from the federal government, I think we need to double down on our efforts here. We have all the ingredients for how we can really be sure that we are serving our diverse communities, and it's going to take coordination. It's going to take actually ground soldiers in each of our communities to inform our policies about how best to serve our communities. I have a great saying that really guides the work that I have done for almost the past 4 decades, and that is being sure that our programs are ground truth, so that everything that we are doing as a state government is actually going to have impact. And that what is actually informing us about how to best serve our communities are the voices from the communities themselves. And when we look at doing that, we know that we are going to be able to deliver results. Because sometimes it's not about serving these communities in the same way as we would other communities around the state. That the way these communities get information is so different. The way that they are accessing health care and so many of the services that are available to them is so different. And by the way, as your governor, I hope to make even more progress on language access, because this has been such a barrier to so many of our diverse communities throughout California. But we do this with the data, because when communities are underserved, we see what happens. We see what happens with health outcomes. We see what happens with the ability to thrive economically, to attain economic mobility. We see what happens from a social standpoint in terms of the ability of family members to continue to thrive and to be able to get into our institutions of public higher education. So I would say this is an area that is ripe for the data to speak for itself. It is right for our community members to step up and to be sure that they are being represented at the policymaking tables. And I also have governed in a way where some people may call it progressive governance, but it is about how we bring equity. Equity is not a dirty word. Equity is just recognizing that there are some communities among us who really didn't get the same start that others did. And that really needs to have some attention in terms of how we make sure that we recognize that as part of our history, and how we are including that in terms of the policies that we put forth. So I'm very happy to say that as I've traveled the state, a lot of this is already happening. And what we have to do as a state government is essentially to have better coordination, have better, well-informed sources of information, to be able to ground truth what we are putting into our programs and services to make sure they are delivering results. And then lastly, being sure that we actually have representation from our diverse communities so that these policies have sustainability. And so I'm just really happy to have this question. It's one that I think is a celebration of who we are as California. And I know there's a lot of federal pushback, but frankly, the federal pushback just has us leaning in more. And I'm going to just use the remainder of my time just to talk about my background, because I think for many of us in this room, you'll be able to relate to my background. But more importantly, it's important that we give voice to where we come from. I am a daughter of immigrants who came from China. And, we didn't have much. There were 6 children in the family. And some of you know my background. I took care of the books for my family's laundry and dry cleaning business. And just as I like to fondly remember those days, I think about my career, how I took care of the books for my family business and became the controller of California, taking care of the books for the great state of California. And I often mention this story because, certainly as having a small family business to really oversee, to help my parents, being an instant advocate because they didn't speak English, and also looking at how that actually helped me develop my own voice in terms of ground truthing for my family, the kinds of programs and services that were going to work for them as small business owners, as people who cared about public education, and being sure that I and my siblings really had access to a lot of the programs and services that we needed growing up. And so I speak to this because I want to encourage all of us to speak to this, because frankly, we're living in an era now of erasure and silencing. And I hope all of us can find that voice and continue to amplify it in terms of what makes this state great. And I am confident that I can serve as governor and be sure that we are making California add up for everyone, because we have so much talent in this state. especially in our underserved communities where they have to innovate every day. When government doesn't touch them, they have to fend for themselves and they have to figure it out. And guess what? There's some beautiful things going on in these communities where if we are actually talking about being serious about civic education, let's go out and visit some of these communities and actually understand there are already things happening that government can actually help scale up and be sure that people are going to be well served. And so I'm just really honored to say that this is really a starting point is that we have so much already here in California. And as a government, it's about how do we connect need to resource? How do we coordinate better? How do we use our financial resources better? And as an expert in fiscal and financial management, I bring this to the table. I'm the only candidate who's been a controller and a state budget director, but I'm also the only candidate who has been able to really call out the need for accountability. Accountability is not a dirty word. It is not about throwing somebody under the bus. It's about how we do better with the resources that we have together. And so together, I know that we can make California add up for everyone again. I know that we can uplift our ethnic communities to where they can see themselves having seats at the table and being future policymakers. And I also know that California being the fourth largest economy in the world, we can do business with anywhere in the world. Anywhere in the world. And as we talk about finite resources with our budget, we ought to be thinking about being the fourth largest economy in the world and acting like it. We can attract investors from around the world. We can get that high-speed rail system built with private investors globally. So these are the things that we have to be aspirational about. And for me, the California dream is alive and well. And it's going to become more realistic for people if we work together, when we bring all of our talents together, and when you have a leader that actually isn't afraid of accountability and being sure that when we solve problems that we are held accountable for the results, or if we're not getting the results, we pull back and we say, how do we do better? I am just proud to be standing here, and I always have to pay tribute to my 102-year-old mother, who I can't even imagine as a small child in her village in Guangdong Province, China, that she would have thought that within a generation that her daughter would be a candidate to be the governor for the state of California. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Miss Betty. So up next, we have someone else who really put up with my tough questions. For folks at home who don't know a lot about the candidates, up next is Mr. Villaraigosa. He is a Democrat running to replace our Governor Gavin Newsom when he terms out next year. Most recently, he was mayor of Los Angeles. Oh, I thought he was holding up 30 seconds for me. Most recently, mayor of Los Angeles. He was formerly, though, an assembly speaker, and I've got to say he was the only candidate who showed up to the interview and then had backgrounded me. He read off my resume to me, so he had done a little research. Normally, I'm the one who's doing the research ahead of an interview. You've got to appreciate that. And I did actually ask him about a couple of bills that he pushed through back in the day, and he was surprised that I knew about him. And I said, yes, sir, I was 12 years old when you passed that bill. But he answered it all these years later. Sir, can you come on up, Mr. Antonio Villaraigosa?
Well, thank you for that. 22 Emmys. Ooh. Serious interviewer. First of all, to APAPA, to Cece and Regina, wherever you are, I can't see you with the lights. Thank you for having us. And thanks for having this here at Cal State in Sacramento.
Sir, you have 8 minutes total for your remarks. Please first address this question presented by Pat Fong Kushida, CEO and President of the California Asian Pacific Chamber of Commerce. California experiences teacher shortages across the grades. According to a Learning Policy Institute, because of the shortages, districts often hire underprepared, inexperienced substitute teachers, increase class sizes, and cut course offerings altogether. As governor, what steps will you take to lessen the teacher shortage and advance retention? Thank you, and sorry for interrupting.
And first of all, thank you. When I got introduced by her, I thought she was introducing me, not you, and apologize for speaking before my turn. It's great to be here with all of you. And as I was saying, I think it is important, and this question is critical. It's important that we're here at a university. Let's be clear. Our generation, or my generation, the children of the greatest generation who sacrificed during the Depression and World War II, gave us this golden state. And we've sat on it and made it a golden egg. We said, let's make it easier for us and tougher on our kids. And I'm running for governor because I think this is an important election. about the future of this state. And this question about teacher shortage is very, very important. Look, I worked for the teachers union for 8 years. My ex-wife was a teacher member and a teacher for 40 some odd years and a union member. And this issue of teacher shortage just didn't start last week. It's happened for a very long time. Why? He said it. We don't pay them enough. They oftentimes have to take out of their pocket to pay for school supplies. And by the way, school supplies are up because of Trump's tariffs, which are taxes. A little square, you know, those note cards, $7.95 at Staples. You know, the cost of education is out of control, and affordability is a critical issue. But our teachers can't buy a home. Our teachers are struggling to make ends meet. And so I'm going to double down on trying to recruit teachers. But not just teachers who have graduated, obviously, with a credential and a BA, but people in the field who have an expertise, who maybe been laid off, who want to change the world. We need to bring them in. We need to recruit them. We need to expand the group of teachers and the pool of teachers that we need. We know that AI is here, but you know, we're still going to need teachers. We're still going to need people to educate our kids. And so, as governor, I'm going to focus like a laser beam, just like I did as mayor. She mentioned real quickly the resume. You know, I've heard all the speakers, and every one of them had something that I could agree with. And I think Julie said that a few minutes ago. There are some decent, good people running for mayor, but none of them have done anything close to a job like this. If you're mayor of Los Angeles, you're like a governor. It's bigger than 42 states. It's the largest state in this country, in this state, by 3.5. It's the second largest city in the nation. If we were a country, the metropolitan area would be the 17th largest economy in the world. And so experience matters. We're all going to say good things. So let me give you the experience. You started with schools, and I'll start with that. When I became mayor, LA had 1 out of 3 schools failing. The San Fernando Valley, if you know the area in Los Angeles, was talking about seceding because the schools were failing. 1 out of 3 schools failing, a 44% graduation rate. By the time I left, it was a 60% increase in the graduation rate. We went from 1 out of 3 failing schools to 1 out of 10. We did that collaborating and working with teachers and parents and administrators to really set the bar high. You know, like some of the other speakers who spoke, I grew up in a tough neighborhood. I grew up poor. My father left when I was 5. I was a high school dropout and kicked out of school before that. I came out of a college prep school, Catholic school. I go to a public school and they put me in basic reading and writing classes, so I dropped out. I go to East LA College, UCLA, and law school after that. I tell people when I used to hear excuses why some schools in cities across this state have been failing for generations, they said, well, you're English language learners. Your parents don't read and write English. You're poor. The best indicia of success is whether your parents went to college. And I said, well, you're describing me. I'm not special. I can read and write. And so I set the highest bar, and we succeeded. But it wasn't just that. Experience. Safety is important in this state. #1 American city in reducing carbon emissions. #5 in the world. Health is important. Took crime down 48% with constitutional and community policing, adding 1,000 police officers. But we didn't just end there. You know what we said? We need after-school programs. We need summer youth jobs. We need to invest in young people again. And so we did. We grew after-school programs by 60%. We went from 2,000 summer youth jobs to more than 12,000. We were focused on investing in people again. The next governor has got to do that. But the next governor's got to focus on something that's really important to people right now. And that's the issue of affordability. A few of the speakers have spoken to it. We have the highest gas prices in the United States of America. We have the second highest utility costs that have gone up 60% in the United States of America. We have the highest home prices. It used to be that home ownership was part of the American dream, and now for our kids, it's an apartment with 3 roommates, 45 minutes to an hour away from work. That is not a formula for success. I think one of our speakers said something about restoring the gold to the golden California. And you're right. That's what we have to do, everybody. So it's important that we're here in Sacramento State. It's important that we're having this conversation. You know, one of the speakers spoke about the red party and the blue party. And, you know, I agree. We need to come together. We need uniters. When I was Speaker of the Assembly, I balanced 2 budgets with a Republican governor, Pete Wilson, and only 42 votes, not a supermajority, and the next year with a Democratic one. When I was mayor, I left us in a sound financial footing. So we need a governor that's going to focus on affordability, a governor that's going to focus on safety, and a governor who's going to focus on making sure that the next generation has a better state than the one they found. I have 30 seconds left, and so let me end with this. I'd be honored to be your governor. But I think right now more than ever, we have one party falling off the flat earth they believe in, and the other one stuck in the clouds with the pie in the sky. There is a center lane here, everybody. A lane that says safety is important, that you can't spend more than you got, that we got to invest in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. All right, our next candidate also answered tough questions. I got to say, this is the theme here. We are going to introduce our next candidate, Javier Becerra, who is also, for folks at home who may not know, running as a Democrat to replace Governor Gavin Newsom when he terms out. Mr. Becerra has a long history both in state government and federal government. He was assembly member, he was in Congress, and then he served as our Attorney General before he moved over to the Biden administration to run HHS during the pandemic. And now he is running for governor. Sir, can you come on up here, please? A reminder, sir, you have 8 minutes total. We'd like you to begin by answering a question provided by Mr. Greg Totten, CEO of the California District Attorneys Association. This is another topic that we actually did cover during our CBS California candidate interviews, so you've already answered this question once, but please answer it for everyone else. According to Stanford University, about 70% of California's homeless live outside a shelter system, sleeping in tents, public open spaces, or in vehicles. A UC San Francisco survey found that 82% of people who are homeless have experienced symptoms of mental illness in their lifetime. As governor, what are some of the steps that you will take to address this homelessness crisis? You have 8 minutes.
Julie, thanks. And to Greg, is Greg in the room, by the way? Because Greg and I had a chance to work together when I was Attorney General and he was a DA. And so I just say hello to Greg if he happens to be in the room. And if he's not, thank you for the question. And to all the members of APAPA, thank you very much for hosting once again this forum so you can have all the candidates come not just before you, but before everyone. Because I know this will be telecast by some, and it is so important. So we appreciate the work that's been done. It does not go unnoticed, the work that's done, because it is not easy to gather folks like this and get all the candidates together. So congratulations once again for the phenomenal work. Let me answer the question very directly. Homelessness, it should be unacceptable in the state of California. We're the 4th largest economy in the world. Does that mean anything? If we are truly the 4th largest economy in the world, if we have that kind of prosperity, how can we watch some of our fellow Californians sleep on the streets? That's not acceptable. I will say to you on homelessness what I have been saying on healthcare, because I intend to be a healthcare governor for California. Just because Donald Trump cuts $1 trillion out of Medicaid, what we call Medi-Cal, we're not going backwards on healthcare. We're not going to start denying people access to care simply because in Washington, D.C., they have created these man-made disasters and are no longer allowing our families to have the care that they need. To go backwards is to be penny wise and pound foolish. To go backward is to not recognize what two great Americans said to me, whether on homelessness or on health care. The first great American, you probably don't know, her name is Maria Teresa Becerra, my mom. And she said to me when I was a small kid, "Mijo, siempre es mejor prevenir que remediar." My son, it is always better to prevent than to try to remediate. The other great American said it more eloquently, perhaps, but he said it about 150, 60, 70 years ago. He said, "It is easier to build strong children than to repair broken men." In America and in California, we're spending tons of money repairing broken men and women when we can build them strong from the very beginning. That was Frederick Douglass who said that a long time ago. And what I will tell you is that California is going to take the attitude of those great Americans. We're not going to wait for someone to lose their housing to be there for them. We're going to make sure that we tell them, you are my family, and we're going to make sure in the fourth largest economy in the world, you have shelter. And I will guarantee you this, under a Becerra governorship, if you are working, you will not become homeless on my watch. Because if you work in this state, if you work like my father, a construction worker, if you work like my mother, a clerical worker, never having had a chance to step in a college classroom, then you deserve to have a roof over your head. You deserve to have access to health care. You deserve to let your kids go to decent schools so they can go on to college or an apprenticeship program or serve in the military the way my three sisters and I did. You deserve to be able to buy your own home, as my parents did on a construction and clerical worker salary. And then after decades of work, you deserve to retire in dignity. That's what my parents did as a construction worker and a clerical worker, immigrants, never having stepped into a college classroom. It's time to go back to where we reward people who work hard. So if you work in California, you will not lose your shelter. If you are unsheltered today, we will find a place for you, because that is not the way you treat your family in the state of California. How will we do that? The same way we're going to do it for health care. And by the way, I know a little bit about that because I was the Secretary of Health and Human Services. I was the chair for one of the 4 years while I was secretary of our interagency council at the federal level for homelessness. We worked with HUD, we worked with VA, we worked with all the federal agencies. And what we did is we worked with the city mayors and we worked with the governors. And what we said is, we're going to do everything we can to streamline all the federal sources of revenue that you get to address homelessness. We're going to try to remove the barriers that don't let you spend $1 from HUD the same way you would want to spend $1 from HHS. So then you have $2 and you can make the best use of it. And what we're going to do is make the best use of the dollars that we have. But what I will tell you is this, on my watch, as I work with our cities and our counties to ensure that the homeless become housed, no one who works in California will lose their home on my watch. And that's how we will begin to reduce homelessness. And we will fight to get every single penny that we send to Washington, D.C. through our tax dollars, because there's nobody in the United States of America who sends more money to the federal treasury than we do in California. We deserve to get our money back that we send to the federal treasury, and we will. Just as I allocated a lot of the mental health service dollars and the substance use dollars that were contributed to the federal treasury to us, back to the states, including California, we'll make sure we fight to get them. And it's not an empty promise, because I've had to fight Donald Trump before. I did it when he was president the first time, when he was in his 4-year term. I was the attorney general, and we fought him, and we fought him. I ended up having to sue the guy about 120 times. Most of the times, we won. I took them all the way to the Supreme Court when they wouldn't defend the Affordable Care Act. It's still here. We won in the Supreme Court. When they tried to get rid of the DACA program, I sued him. We won. And dreamers are still allowed to stay in the United States of America. We can win if we know how to fight. But you need to have someone who knows how to fight, who's actually been engaged in those fights. I want to just say to you as I get ready to close, we're in a crisis right now. Our democracy is being asked to bend. And in some cases, someone is insisting that it break. We can't let that happen. We have to be ready to fight. Or as I would tell my team in the AG's office, we have to counterpunch before they even land their first punch. And if we do that, we will survive, as we did the first time. But here's what it's going to take. It's going to take someone who's run an operation, an enterprise the size of the United States of America or the size of the fourth largest economy, the state of California. There's no one who's running for governor of California who's run an enterprise, a public enterprise, as large as I have. How large? I know you know the Department of Defense is big. My budget at HHS is twice as big as the Department of Defense. Actually, my budget at HHS, it was 5 times bigger than the budget of the state of California. 4 years in a row, I balanced my budget at HHS. And at the same time, I helped pull us out of that COVID pandemic that was raging when President Biden and our team, we took over. And today, you're not wearing masks. You're able to socialize. The economy is moving because we pulled us out of that COVID pandemic. Name me a crisis bigger than the COVID pandemic that we have faced in the state of California. Name me anyone else who can tell you who's actually negotiated and dropped the price of some of the most expensive prescription drugs in America. That's what I did, because we have a law that allowed us to negotiate, and in some cases we dropped the price of some of those expensive drugs by up to 80%. Name me someone else who took a diving America when it came to health insurance coverage, because Americans were losing their job and therefore their coverage, and turned it around and got us to record levels, because by the time I left, more than 300 million Americans had their own health insurance coverage. We need someone at the wheel who knows how to take California to great heights. I hope you'll be with me as we go through this campaign.
Thank you, Javier Becerra. We are now introducing our 8th and final candidate, Katie Porter, to our center stage podium. Thank you for joining us, Katie. You also have 8 minutes total for your remarks. And thank you in advance for providing a response to this randomly selected question. This question comes from Jason Chan, chair of the California API Legislative Caucus Institute. According to a study done by Emerson College in 2025, more Californians are moving out of the state than those moving in. About 56% of respondents said they would have considered leaving California due to the high cost of living. As governor, how would you address the high cost of living? Thank you.
Thank you so much for the question, and thank you, APAPA, for having me. I just want to say thank you to Mary and to Sunny for putting this on, and take a moment to especially acknowledge the role of CC in founding the amazing organization that APAPA has become today. I am delighted to be here to talk with you, and I think this question about the cost of living and what it means for California, I could not have drawn a question that I am more passionate about. Some of you may know that I am a single mom to 3 school-aged children. My oldest son just started college. I have one in 11th grade and one in 8th grade. So I think about California's future a lot. And I think about particularly what does that mean for my kids? Are they going to find jobs here? Are they going to be able to afford to live here? What will the California of 10 and 20 years look like? And my own story is about coming to California. I was recruited here for the job. I came here for the work, for the economy, for the way of life, for the quality public schools that I have in Irvine, for the safety of that community. And we need to make sure that that story, there are so many more generations of Californians who tell that story of coming to California, of choosing California. But the costs of living here are a real barrier to doing that. And we're seeing it. We're seeing it in the data, the population data, which shows that we have people who are leaving California in some instances, businesses sometimes leaving California. And we also see it in the aging population that we have, especially with President Trump and these crackdowns on immigration, the attacks that he's making on immigrants. We are seeing our immigration patterns slow in California. And what that means is we're facing an aging population, especially in our biggest cities, San Francisco, Los Angeles, Riverside. And so we really, really want, when people ask me, when you run for governor, when you're governor and you're done 8 years later, what do you want for California? What do you want to see in California? My answer is I want to see California as the place of choice for young people and young families, for people who want to start a business, for people who want to grow their business. I think we have to be honest. California is in competition with other states and with other countries to get that work and to get those workers. And so it's the job of the governor to make sure that California wins each and every one of those competitions. We have amazing resources at our disposal to do that, including world-class, best in the United States, and I am biased because I work at UC Irvine, but the best in the United States, state universities, both our UCs, but also our Cal States and our community colleges. So the question I would ask about this is, are those graduates that we're investing our tax dollars in at places like Sacramento State, are they going to be able to live in California? Are they going to choose to live in California? And one of the biggest reasons that some people are not, one of the biggest challenges to committing to staying a Californian or choosing to become one, is the cost of housing. We need to create more high-paying jobs in California, but we also must create the housing for the workers to do those jobs. Right now, California has more jobs than housing. Our ratio is more out of whack than any other state. So making sure that we're building good quality housing in safe communities that people want to start their lives as young workers in, that they're going to be able to find housing when they choose to start a family, housing that our seniors can age in, so that California remains a place where people stay during retirement. So when we talk about costs, housing is the biggest chunk of most people's budgets. And so that has to be where we start with bringing down costs. To do that, we need to build a lot more housing, including on our campuses so we can expand the size of our student bodies. We need to build more housing for people with disabilities. The market is not going to do that without the government stepping up and helping and making that possible. More housing for seniors. As I mentioned, we have an aging population and they want to age in place. So we need to think about how to have housing that is for multi-generational families, that allows for caregiving in the home. So I would say that's the number one thing that I think about, bringing down those costs. It's not, housing isn't the number one cost for most families. It's not the only one. We also have to think about energy, about child care and senior care, and also about the costs of food and being able to afford to buy everyday items here. I'm particularly passionate about child care and elder care. When we talk about young families, we talk about keeping retirees. In most states, including California, child care for an infant costs more than college tuition. And we are not going to be able to continue to grow our population and attract those younger families if people can't afford to get that care, a care that then enables them, if they choose to work outside the home. So we have to think about childcare for what it is, an investment. Just like housing, it's an investment in making sure people can live in California. My background is as a law professor specializing in consumer protection and doing a lot of studies of people in financial distress. I served the state of California under then Attorney General Kamala Harris, helping families who were having trouble hanging on to their homes or their apartments during the foreclosure crisis. So I have seen firsthand in communities around California how challenging it is when people are threatened with the loss of a home or they cannot find and afford housing. So that's going to be my number one focus. I think it's the most important thing we can do to make sure that the California of the future continues to be a place that people who want to come here can come here, that people that come here can afford to stay here. And to do that, we have to make sure that we're working hand in hand with businesses, and I would work hand in hand with the legislature to make sure that they are laser focused on those costs and on making investments that drive down costs. So I am going to be maybe the only speaker you've had today that ends early. But as a professor, I know that students like nothing better than to be released just a wee bit early from class. So I am going to stop right now, but I just want to again say a special thanks not only to APAPA, but to each of the students who's here. If you're a student, would you raise your hand? To everyone who's a student who's in this room. I just want to salute APAPA for having this future orientation, for thinking about the future of California and for investing in those young people. As someone who's a teacher, who's a professor, who walks our campuses every single day, thank you for helping build the next generation of California thought leaders and policy leaders. I'm so grateful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Katie Porter. For folks at home who may not know, she is a professor of law. She is a Democrat running to replace Governor Gavin Newsom when he terms out, and a former U.S. representative. Well, folks, Katie Porter is our last candidate for the afternoon. I do want to remind you that you can continue to tune in to CBS News California stations across the state and watch our interviews. We're starting off rolling out those one question with each candidate. Those are airing nightly, and over the next couple of weeks, we're going to start breaking down these issues by topic, so you can hear every candidate's answer to the same question side by side, and maybe more importantly, their answer to the follow-up questions when we push back on those talking points. So stay tuned for that. Thank you all in person for being so lovely. Thank you to our viewers across the state. That does it for our show in terms of our live broadcast.